Good morning, Illini. Welcome back to Healthy Illini Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schrock, and we have a lot to get into today, so I'm going to keep this introduction short. We're glad you're here with us. We're glad you're hopefully staying warm as it's gotten cold here, but I'm excited to bring in an RSO and an organization that we haven't had before and you may not have heard of, and that is Four Paws at UIUC. So we'll jump right into it because we do have a lot to cover. I have three guests today. Our first guest is Katie Perry. She is a third-year animal science major with concentration in companion animal and equine science, and she is a part of Four Paws for Ability at UIUC, the vice president for that. And so, Katie, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to share a little bit about our org.
And with Katie is Emily Panzik. She's the president of Four Paws at UIUC, for Ability at UIUC. And she's a third-year psych major with concentration in behavioral neuroscience and a minor in animal science. Emily, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
And our third guest, you can't see, and I really hate that. Honestly, this is the one episode where I almost wish we had video just so you could see. But we are joined by Olive, who is one of the service dogs with Four Paws. She is a 1-year-old full golden retriever, and she's a freshman here on campus. She joined the campus back in the fall, and so we're excited to have Olive. So if you hear any noises in the background, it's just Olive being very excited and going through the room, and we're thrilled to have her here as well. Do you want to have Olive say hi?
Sure. Ollie, you come here. Okay, can you speak? Speak. Oh, she's being shy now. Speak. Speak.
Close enough. She's off duty, and we'll talk about what that is. And when I get off my job, I don't want to talk to anybody either. So, but if you
inside, she's like, "Are you sure I'm allowed?"
Yeah.
So if you hear any of those noises, it's just Olive being all around the table, and we're thrilled to have her and both of you here. So we've talked about before with other episodes that we have a large number of RSOs here at UIUC, which is fantastic because it gives really truly gives every student a chance to connect with somebody and find a home and find a community, no matter what they're looking for. And Four Paws for Ability is one of those RSOs, and one that people may not know as much about, which I'm excited to share because not only because do I get to promote the things that you do, I get to learn myself. And that's really the exciting part for me, that I get to learn so much about this campus. So I want to start right off with an obvious question. What is Four Paws for Ability?
Yeah, sure. I can take this one. So we are a fully student-run organization that helps raise and train service dogs for children and veterans with disabilities. We are a college chapter of a larger charity that's based out of the Dayton, Ohio area. So they're in charge of doing all of the breeding and placing and advanced training, all those sorts of things. So our organization is made up of volunteers through them, and we help just do basic training and socialization for their dogs until they're ready to be placed. And
so you function as a part of that larger organization. Are there things that the larger organization does that you don't, or things that you specifically do here that you don't find other places? Or how does that work as being a part of something bigger?
Yeah, for sure. So we are actually just a very small part of their whole mission. So all the dogs that are part of this program are bred there. So they have their breeder dogs, and all the litters are coming from there. They've got a couple different breeds. They've got Goldens, Labs, Newfies, even some Papillons, which are kind of fun. We don't see those too often. So they all go... They're bred there, and then once they're 2 months old at the earliest, they can be off to go to foster, and that's when they come to colleges or some traditional households, and that's where they're just growing up. They're just getting used to the environment, learning that the world isn't a scary place, doing basic training, kind of things that you would teach your pet dogs and stuff. And then after they are done with us, when they're around a year to a year and a half, then they will go to advanced training, which is where they're doing specific task training for whatever disability a person has. So there, it can be a multitude of things. It can be things for autism support, such as behavior disruption. It can be something as a diabetic alert, seizure alert, things like that they'll do to train the dog to, help the person through those kind of struggles. And then after that, they're getting placed with that person, and the person will come to headquarters and learn how to work with the dog, and then they go off as a graduated service dog. So
I want to talk more about that in a minute.
Yeah,
so we'll come back to that. I want to talk about some more specifics about what a service dog is and what it does.
Yeah.
But coming back to Four Paws here at UIUC, so about how many members do you have? And I understand there's different roles within the organization. So would you share a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, we have roughly 160 members in the RSO. It sticks around that number year to year. It has been steadily growing just a little bit each year, which is great. And I believe that we have 30 members who are certified to handle the dogs on campus. So that can mean they are a primary handler or a secondary handler. The process for certification is the same for both. You just do a Canvas module, learning the ins and outs of how to handle the dogs, proper care and maintenance of the dogs, and the rules for handling a 4-paws service dog in training in particular. And then you go to headquarters and do a few short classes in person learning how to handle the dogs. And then when you come back, you are able to handle the service dogs in training, which pretty much means you can have them independently, holding their leash, working with them. But our general members who aren't certified are also more than welcome to come to our events and work with the dogs, like feed them treats, help us act as distractions, and with other training activities.
So if you have 30 handlers right now, does that mean you have 30 dogs in your organization right now? How many dogs are on campus right now with 4-paws?
Yeah, so right now we have 6 or 7, but that number also fluctuates quite a bit. Last year I think we had close to 15 at one point, so we did have a decent amount. It just depends, how many people want to take on the commitment, because it is a lot of work. So no, we do not have 30 dogs on campus, but we technically do have the ability to have 30 dogs on campus since we do have 30 certified people.
And so Olive is with you.
Yes,
this
she's
is
mine.
Yours.
Yeah.
And so before we get into the other part of it, what was that process like to get Olive, and then how are you preparing for the next step?
Yeah, for sure. So Olive is actually my second foster. So I did have a dog before her. His name was Carver. I had him for about a year. He actually ended up flunking. He was afraid of cars. So, the service dog life is not for every dog. But yeah, basically as soon as he flunked, I was ready to get back into it. And so I picked up Olive over the past summer in 2024. And I was already certified at that time, so I didn't have to go through any more certification processes. So I went to headquarters, I picked her up, and then I was free to start the training process with her.
Do you choose the dog that you pick up, or are you assigned, or is it kind of a combination of those two?
It's a little bit of a combination. So basically you just tell headquarters what kind of breed you want and roughly what age you want. So I got her at 4 months. You can get them as early as 2 months or as late as, a year. I think it would probably be the latest. And then they'll assign you based on what they have.
And you said that the fostering process is about a year and a half?
Yeah, it really just depends on what age you get the dog at. So if you get a super young puppy at that 2-month age, then obviously you're going to have the dog longer. Most dogs, I would say, go back to advanced training around a year and a half old. So it really just depends.
Okay, so that's kind of a very, bird's eye view of what 4-paws does.
Yeah.
I do want to get down a little bit more specifics on some of the roles and also on what a service dog is. But you mentioned that, Emily, you're a primary handler and Katie, you're a secondary handler, and you go through the same training, but what is the difference in designation? Is there a difference in designation on those two?
Yeah, so pretty much the main difference is that a primary handler is a full foster for a dog. So Olive is my foster, so she lives with me, she comes to class with me, she goes to stores, restaurants, wherever, and she is my responsibility, whereas a secondary handler like Katie and some of our other secondaries on campus, they're puppy sitters, I would say, which is where they're able to dog sit for the primaries if the primary needs a break, or they have a place to go where they can't necessarily bring the dog, or if the primary just needs a break. It is a lot of work. So
you're assigned Olive as a primary.
Yes.
Do you have a designated secondary, or is it just you can use anybody who?
No, I can use anyone who's certified. So.
Okay, so so many questions. I'm actually struggling a little bit with this conversation because I have so many questions bouncing in my head right now. I'm trying to process through them all. So we've talked about the organization, but I do want to give a chance because somebody's listening to this and they're like, "Oh, this sounds really cool. This sounds great," but I don't really know what a service dog is. And in our prep work, you had made one comment you had made is that there is a difference between a service dog and an emotional support animal. And so if you would, let's just go through a little bit and explain what a service dog is, what their tasks are, and kind of what makes them distinct as far as what they are and what their role is.
Yeah, so service animals and emotional support animals are both very important. but they are fundamentally different, and it's really important for the community as a whole to know those differences between the two. So, service dogs, the rough definition through the ADA or Americans with Disabilities Act is any animal that is trained to do work or perform tasks for a person with a disability. Where an emotional support animal is more of somebody's pet who provides comfort and emotional support through proximity. So the most important difference to note with that would be that service dogs go through formal training and they are task trained. So they perform work that aids in mitigating the effects of a person's disability, where emotional support animals don't have to go through any sort of formal training because their presence alone is what helps their owner or handler. And so another important difference to note would be the legal protections surrounding emotional support animals and service dogs. There are a lot of common misconceptions with that. So emotional support animals are protected through the Fair Housing Act, which is just a non-discriminatory act that allows people with emotional support animals to have fair access to housing, where service dogs have legal protections for public access rights. So since they are considered like a piece of medical equipment in a way, through the law, they are allowed to go into public spaces like restaurants, stores, schools, etc., and they are protected there. There are only 2 questions that business owners can ask service dog handlers to make sure that it is a legitimate service dog. And those questions are, is that a service animal required because of a disability? And what work or tasks is the service animal trained to perform? And so another common misconception would be that there is a registration system for service dogs or emotional support animals, and that is false. Neither one of them has any sort of registration. So if a business does ask you to provide like a registration paper for your service dog, that's not something they can do. And those are the only 2 questions that they can ask. And so those are pretty much the main differences between the two. And it's really important to understand whether you have a service dog or an emotional support animal, just to make sure that you are making the best environment for both parties.
So you go back to the tasks that are performed. What are some just common tasks? And then do you have specific, as a primary handler, do you have a specific checklist that you're trying to train or you're trying to instill? And does that change based on disability?
Yeah, so for being the primary handler, we're still doing like very basic training with the dog. So kind of like I said before, just doing things that you would pretty much teach like a traditional pet, how to behave, well-mannered and things like that. But then we're taking that and we're applying it into more situations where pet dogs wouldn't go. So by going into a store and learning how to settle, not be distracted, not pulling on the leash, things like that. Kind of with that being said, since we're just doing that basic training, we're not doing any specific tasks for any of those disabilities. One thing that we do kind of get into a little bit is behavior disruption tasks, because they're relatively easy to train, and it's really useful for pretty much like any disability, I would say. So that could be as much as doing an over, which is where the dog will come and sit like on your lap if you're sitting down, a lap, which is where the dog will put their head on your lap, kind of a comfort thing, or nuzzle, where it's like, if a person is like having a tantrum, or they're crying and upset and they've got like their hands and their arms, the dog will come up and kind of come up through your arms and like kind of disrupt that behavior, hence the name behavior disruption. So they don't really get taught those tasks until they're in advanced training. So yeah, we're just doing kind of the basic stuff right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to bounce off of that, we are pretty much just building a really good foundation. Like, it takes a long time to have a well-mannered, well-trained dog, and you cannot get to those advanced, like, task training, work without a really good foundation. So that's the first step and one of the most important steps in training a service dog. Is a lot of people ask us, like, oh, what all tricks do they know? Like, show me some things that they can do, and how often do you explicitly train them? And we always usually tell them, like, every waking moment, spending time with the dog is an opportunity to train. We're always kind of gauging how they react to different situations and trying to get them used to being in public and being around different distractions.
Do you bring all the dogs on campus together at certain times? Like, is that a scheduled thing, or is it just kind of happens with meetings, or is that part of the training is having that interaction?
Yeah, for sure. So socialization is a huge part for these dogs. If they're not socialized, they're gonna have a really hard time doing specific tasks. So we do have specific times we bring them all together. We have training sessions every other Tuesday, and that's just a time. It's like an hour once a week or every other week where the dogs come together and we just work on doing whatever task the dogs need to work on. So we do have kind of themes for those training sessions. I can let Katie talk about those a little bit since she runs those.
Yeah, as a vice president, I plan and execute the training sessions bi-weekly. And we work on a few different activities at each one. I usually try to have a theme. Our last one was body language, and I played a few educational videos about canine body language to give our general members some education. We have a lot of animal sciences majors in the club, but a few of our members are not animal sciences majors, and we love to see more of that. And so I was hoping to just provide some insight about canine body language and just everything, dogs that people are interested in learning about. And then to kind of match with the Valentine's Day time of year and body language and love theme, we decided to do some of those behavior disruption task work. So we practiced the nuzzle and over, which is a deep pressure therapy task.
Do you find that there are certain tasks you're trying to train that are consistently more difficult than others, or is it purely every experience is unique?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really just depends on the situation that you're in. If you're in a very low distraction environment, the dogs are relatively good at, listening and doing whatever you ask them to do. If you're outside and there's squirrels running around, having to calm them down from that, it can be quite difficult. So just bringing them into those different environments, it's always, you're constantly training them and constantly, putting them in those different situations so that way they can kind of get exposed to as much as they can.
This is just a very particular question for Olive. Is there a particular place on campus that she likes best? Does she have a favorite? We ask everybody, what's your favorite spot on campus? That kind of thing. Yeah. What's her favorite spot on campus?
Oh, that's a hard one. Honestly, I feel like it's got to be the quad. There's so many squirrels. She just goes bonkers sometimes. I'm like, this is kind of embarrassing, Olive. Can you calm down, please? But no, she loves it. And honestly, it's great for her training because every time I walk on the quad, I'm I'm giving her treats and we're learning to, not be so distracted by the squirrels. And I can tell every time I walk on the quad, she's getting a little better. So
yeah, and to kind of circle back to that question you asked about what the most difficult thing to teach is, from my experience as a secondary, which is just a puppy sitter, I have all of the different dogs for a few hours at a time whenever the primaries need a break. It would be fighting instincts. So these dogs are very eager to learn. They love learning commands, but at the end of the day, they are still dogs. The Goldens and Labs and the type of dogs that we use for this type of training, they're very good. They're probably one of the best breeds that you can use for service work, but at the end of the day, they're still dogs, and dogs have this instinct to chase small, fuzzy things that move. And so that's one of the biggest challenges for them, is not to just go and, follow that urge to chase those squirrels.
Do you ever find as a secondary that sometimes it's more difficult for the dogs to focus and follow command when it's you as opposed to the person they're with all the time? I mean, do you find that shift ever?
Honestly, I feel like sometimes the dogs behave a little bit better when they're with me, just because it's not their. It's kind of like
it's like sending your kid to school.
I was just gonna say,
teachers are like, they're wonderful. I'm like, really, my kid? You're talking?
Yes,
they listen great. Really,
just a personal little anecdote. But my mom runs an in-home daycare, and whenever the parents drop off their children to daycare, they tend to behave a lot better whenever they are in a different environment, because they're so used to their person. Emily is kind of like Olive's mom.
Right.
And so when Olive's with the babysitter, she's excited and she's like, oh, new person, maybe I should be on my best behavior. And so
that's amazing. So do you I know what's the balance? That's this question. What's the balance between I'm training and I'm just playing with my dog? Because do you have to differentiate that? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I would say that kind of differentiating that time is really just a time and place kind of thing. So if we're out and she's got the vest on, she knows that she's working, and she knows that she has to behave. We're not jumping on people because we're excited. We're not, running around. I'm not letting her chase squirrels on the quad. But when we're at home and, if she wants to play like fetch in the apartment, it's a very small apartment, but we do it. I let her do that because, at the end of the day, she is still a dog, and you need to let them get that, kind of energy out when they need to, because otherwise they're going to be really sad because they just want to do dog things sometimes. And that kind of like, I would say, goes along with not every dog is meant to be a service dog. There's a lot of dogs that are like, I just don't have the drive to work. I don't have the drive to serve someone. And headquarters does a really good job of noting that and then making sure that they don't turn those dogs into service dogs that don't want to do it. They're never going to force a dog to work if they don't want to, which is a really great thing.
You mentioned headquarters, and going back to some of the logistic questions. So in getting a dog and being the primary handler and training, is there a cost for, like, do you have to do an application cost? Does the RSO have to pay? And then, like, do you get a stipend for, like, food and veterinary services? How does that all function?
Yeah, for sure. So with headquarters, they do a lot of their fundraising there. So they will provide us with the food, monthly meds, a few toys, very basic needs that the dog needs. But for the most part, any like additional things, that's all on us, all on volunteers, on fosters to provide. So that's where our RSO kind of comes into play a little bit more, because we do a lot of fundraising to provide for some of those more necessary like costs. Like, the dogs need to have toys. They can't just have like one tennis ball and call it a day. And they do get very spoiled by us. But yeah, so that's a big thing that we do is fundraising, so that way the dogs can, have a very fulfilled life. And also headquarters is about 4 hours away since it is in like the Dayton area. So we do a really good job of like carpooling with all the primaries that are heading back and forth to headquarters to, pick up supplies when needed. But yeah, so we also have a vet not on campus, but right outside campus that does give us a nice discount. So we do utilize them for some of the less major veterinary costs.
Yes, veterinary work would be free if we were to go all the way back to headquarters, but like we bring these puppies to campus at 2 months old and they still haven't finished up their puppy vaccines. And so getting that discount at the local clinic is such a huge help. And we're so thankful for them for working with us, because making that 4.5 to 5 hour trip all the time for the primaries is a really big cost for fuel and their time.
So, this kind of leads me into a pivot into a question about the RSO specific. But before I get there, if somebody wants to donate, do you take donated items like gently used toys or anything, or like, financial donation? I know you do fundraising, but just like in general, somebody says, hey, I want to give to the RSO. Is that something that's potentially possible?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're always looking for extra things to help our dogs out. We don't get a whole lot of, physical donations, I would say. A lot more of it comes monetarily, just because it's like we don't necessarily know what we need. But yeah, we will happily take anything that people are either trying to give away or just want to help us out.
Yeah, and I'm actually, as vice president, another one of my duties is to collect donations, mostly like item donations, and we have gotten a few this year. We don't have a lot of space. We requested like a storage space here on campus, but that just wasn't able to be fulfilled. So I am keeping all of our items in my apartment. So we do have quite a few like toys and stuff right now, but it is really helpful for the new primaries whenever they get to campus with their dog. I put together a pup basket for them that has a few starter toys, some waste bags, a chew bone, and shampoo, a few other items. So we do love receiving donations and appreciate anything that somebody can offer.
So that leads me to the where I was trying to get to next is if somebody wants to get involved. How, like, whether it be somebody with donation or a student that wants to get involved, how do they get in contact with you? What kind of, I know we talked about that you have primary, secondary, and then you have the non-handler positions, but what does that mean if you're part of the RSO and you're not a handler? Like, how does this all function? If you want to give a little shout out for the organization and how you do things and how people could get connected with you.
Yeah, for sure. So, like we mentioned, we've got a couple different types of involvement. So if you just want to be a standard like general member, which is where you're allowed to come to our general meetings, training sessions, and help out there, stop by our fundraisers, member socials, all that kind of stuff. All you have to do is pay dues. It's $30 for the year, $20 for the semester, and again, that money all goes towards the dogs. We're not keeping any of it. And so that's all you have to do. You can Venmo, Zelle, cash, whatever. We're pretty flexible with that. If you have questions, you're still not sure, maybe after listening to this podcast, you want more information, you can go ahead and email us. Or we have a little interest form on our website that you can also visit and send us a message to, and we're pretty good about getting back to you with any kinds of questions you have. If you want to be a secondary, kind of the same deal. You just have to pay dues and then get certified, and then you're all good to go. Primary, you don't actually have to pay dues because you're spending, a lot of your own personal money on the dogs, and we do recognize that. So we don't make you pay dues for that. And then if you want to be even more involved, you can always be on exec board and apply to be on exec.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Before we go on, you mentioned email and a website. Would you want to say what those are? Those will be in the bio. So if you're listening and you want to check that out, you can click on those links. But go ahead if you want to mention though.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully I don't screw this up. I think our email is uiuc4paws@gmail.com.
So I can confirm.
And our website is the same thing,
yes.
uiuc4paws.com.
Yeah, I would highly recommend visiting the website. So that's Emily's responsibility. It's set up very nicely, and she also made it mobile friendly this year. It's a great resource for anything that has to do with our RSO. It has everything laid out very nicely.
And I can confirm that because that's how I got in contact with you all, through the website. It was very easy to navigate and very well done. And so if somebody is wanting to be a part of it, but they're not necessarily wanting to go to the handler level, how often do you meet? How often do you have those fundraisers? What kind of what's the expectation of as far as involvement or just even as your visibility on campus?
So we kind of do everything on a monthly basis. So every month we have one general meeting, and that's the first Thursday of every month. We have our training sessions every other Tuesday, so that'll be twice a month. We have one fundraiser, one collaboration, and one member social, that's right. And as a general member, you're welcome to come to as many or as few as you want. We don't have any attendance requirements, so it's really up to you. You're more welcome to come to all of them. You don't have to come to any of them. It's all good. So the only attendance requirements we have are for the primaries, just because we want to make sure that we're seeing the dogs, and if we're helping support them, we want you guys to support us. So.
And even then, if you're interested in becoming a primary but you have a busy schedule, we track the dog's attendance rather than the handler's attendance. So I'm a secondary, and I've brought dogs to events for the primary several times, and then that dog will get a green check mark for that day. So if you want to be a primary, but you think you might need a little bit more support, making it to those attendance requirements, and we do have the resources.
Kind of bouncing off that a little bit too, if you're interested in being a primary but don't know if you can fully do it yourself, we also have co-primaries, which is when two people handle the dog. So basically you have one primary and then one secondary, but you call each other co-primaries, and you guys can kind of figure out on your own schedule how you would like to organize who has the dog when and stuff.
So if somebody's listening and they're like, this sounds great. I love animals, I love dogs, whatever, and I want to get involved, and I'm considering doing a primary. What do they need to be aware of going? Is there certain? What would you say as somebody who is a primary, Emily, that these are the things you need to be aware of before you go in? These are the tips I would have. This is what you need to understand before you take that step.
Yeah, for sure. So the first big thing I would always say is that it is a lot of work. Don't go into this thinking that it's just I'm having a dog. If you have a family pet at home and your parents are constantly taking the dog out, just keep in mind that on campus when you're living by yourself, that's your responsibility now. So, you're going to wake up early to take the dog out for a pee in the morning. You're going to take the dog out for a pee at night. Just be prepared to do that. You're taking this dog pretty much everywhere with you. So you're taking it to class, you're taking it, to stores, to restaurants. So, it's kind of they do hang on you a little bit, but, honestly, it's nice when I'm sitting in class and, you got a little friend with you. But yeah, so I would say that's the big thing is just knowing that it's a big responsibility. I mean, you're taking care of another thing. And then the other thing too is we do require you to have a car on campus, since you will have to take those trips to headquarters every once in a while. And then we do have like some field trips that we do, that you have to be able to have reliable transportation, to and from those places. So yeah, I'd say those are the two big things. I don't know, Katie, if you...
Yeah, one other thing, I just wanted to again be like, don't fret if you want to be a primary and you don't have a car on campus, because we do have that co-primary option, and a lot of people chose that because they don't have a car on campus and they don't have the option to have a car on campus, so they found a friend, or we can even pair you with somebody who's interested in being a co-primary who does have a car, and then you are all good. You can get your dog and work that out with your co-primary. Still a possibility, and we will support you as much as we can.
And from the national standpoint, as best you can answer, is there something that they look for? Like, is there an interview process, or how do you? And I know you said there's, like, we talked about it, it's a combination of them providing a dog and the applicant. But is there anything in that process that's like, this is what they're considering, this is what they're looking for?
No, honestly, no. You just have to fill out that interest form. The big things that they're really looking for, making sure that you don't have any thing in your household, or you're not in an environment that wouldn't be safe for the dog. So, if you're in a traditional household and you have a family pet that's not super good with other dogs, they obviously don't want to give you a dog that, you could have some potential issues there. But other than that, you fill out that interest form. You do a little online kind of Zoom call, and they'll tell you a little bit more about the organization. Like Katie said, then you do the Canvas course, go through it, and then you can go and pick up your dog after your in-person orientations.
The other end, how difficult is it when you get to the end of your fostering and it's time for the advanced and they move on or whatever? Is that a difficult process?
Oh my gosh, it's awful. Yeah, in the nicest terms, it's awful. You really do get attached to these dogs, especially when you have them for a year. So my last foster, I had him for a whole year, and then he ended up flunking out. When they do flunk out, they become fabulous flunkies. And you have the option of adopting them, or they can be put up for adoption through their wait list that they have. Unfortunately, I was not able to adopt him. Just wasn't the right time for me to have a full golden retriever on campus that couldn't come to class with me. So I did have to put him up for adoption, but I did get to meet this family that he went to, and the family sends me pictures and stuff and keeps me updates all the time. And the same thing kind of goes for when the dog goes to advanced training. So, the headquarters will send you updates weekly, I think, with the how the dog's doing and everything, and, how their progress is. And then a lot of times the families will keep in touch with the fosters and the volunteers, because they know that we were such an integral part in that training process. But yeah, it's awful. It's really hard. I think the big thing that you have to tell yourself, if they do go on to become a fully trained service dog, is that they're here because they're helping someone else. Right. You didn't need the dog as much as someone else did. They're life changing to them. They're making that person's life a million times better. And I think that kind of helps you let go of the dog a little bit. Yeah,
for sure. And you go into that idea and that mindset. It's not easy, I'm sure, but it does help having that understanding of that's the purpose of it in the end.
Rewarding but bittersweet experience. They're a part of something bigger.
Speaking of being a part of something, before we end, because we're running out of time, which I hate because I love this conversation, but off air, before we started, we were talking about the litters and things like that, and you actually mentioned that there's an opportunity for groups who sponsor to name litters, and there's actually a litter that is connected to the University of Illinois. So would you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So with headquarters, they're in charge of, breeding all the dogs, like I mentioned before. So with that, in order to raise service dogs, it is quite costly. Each service dog is roughly $40,000 to fully raise. So they do require quite a bit of funding to help that. So if you'd like to sponsor a litter, you have to raise $10,000 and donate it to headquarters. And so us as an RSO, we were actually able to do that, and we hit that 10,000 mark. So then we were tasked with naming the litter, and then picking the names for the dogs in the litter, which was a super fun experience. So we have a University of Illinois themed litter. They are golden doodles. They are, I think, around a year now.
Just a little bit over a year.
Yeah, and so a couple of the names. We have Urbana on campus, actually. We have Ike, Grange, Murphy,
Illini,
yeah,
and
Alma, yeah. So those are the University of Illinois litter dogs, and they are so cute. I absolutely love them.
We hope that they will all go on to advanced training and become fully trained service dogs to change somebody's life. That's kind of like the pride that comes with sponsoring a litter. If you're a business listening and you're interested, you can choose the names that kind of advertise for your business. So you can reach out if you want any more information about that. But it's a huge help to Four Paws for Ability headquarters. And I believe that $10,000 goes toward all of the gear that the primaries get, like their Easy Walk harness that they wear, collars, tags, leashes, the vests that they wear, and their future like big boy and big girl vests that they wear when they're actually officially fully trained service dogs, along with food, monthly meds, and everything like that.
That's amazing, and it's such a cool thing, and kudos to you guys for raising $10,000. That's amazing. That's outstanding, though. You said the number, I was like, oh wow. So yeah, that's really great. I would love to sit here and just chat for like the rest of the day, but I really appreciate you coming and sharing and just giving a spotlight to something that's really cool on campus that people may not have known about. So Emily, Katie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
This is great.
Definitely reach out, follow us on Instagram. We would love to have you.
What's your Instagram?
It is Four Paws UIUC, and the profile picture, you'll see like a black eye, and then also a little puppy hanging off of the eye, so pretty easy to find. But yeah, we are very accepting of all sorts of students, all different majors, so definitely get involved. We would love to have you.
Fantastic. I do want to ask, because a lot of the conversation that we're having is about how this organization, Four Paws for Ability UIUC, supports the national office, supports each other in training and raising and providing for the dogs and support the dogs. And then the purpose is to go out and support others with disability through this process, so they have that advantage, they get that benefit. But it's not just a give on your guys' side. Anybody who's involved in this RSO, I'm sure, receives as well. You want to talk about how that functions?
Sure. Yeah, so a lot of our members come up to us at our events and they say, oh, this is my daily dose of dopamine, and I miss my dog at home so much. This made me so happy to be here. I was so stressed, and it's so nice to be here petting these dogs and just smiling and having a fun time. So we love to hear that, and we actually do provide like a de-stress with the Pups event when it's final season. So we're hoping to get sponsored by Celsius this semester for the final season event. So we'll have like a little energy drink handout, and then also just we let the dogs play. They're off duty, and members are allowed to come into whatever space we're taking up and hang out with the dogs and do a little bit of de-stressing. Then also our member socials are a really good resource for like building relationships. Sometimes we have events with the dogs, but sometimes we have events without the dogs, depending on where we are. We've had like, we'll go out to like Murphy's Pub and do like a bingo, or I think it's trivia night. Yeah, that was super fun. Just an opportunity to make friends and get a little bit of time away from studying.
There's lots of opportunities here on campus to get involved in a lot of things, and I know there are lots of dog lovers on campus because I hear about it all the time. But if you're curious about more about what Four Paws does, how you can get involved, how you can support them, just have questions about what it is, want to see more about the dogs they have on campus and the dogs that are sponsored, reach out to them, find out, ask your questions, follow them on Instagram, check out their website, just connect with them, because you never know. Again, it's one of the beautiful things of this campus. You have so many opportunities to find your community and find your connections, and this is just another one of those. So I encourage you to reach out, support them. They're doing great work. They're supporting people in so many ways that you may not have heard of or not be familiar with. So, give them a shout out, find out what's going on, and see how they may be able to be a part of your journey. You may be able to be a part of theirs. But thank you for joining us today. You're on a personal journey no matter where you are in it. You are important and you matter. Your health and wellness are important and matter, and we're here to keep you well to excel. So go have a great week, Illini. Let us know how you're doing, and we'll catch you next time on Healthy Illini.